Story Bank presents Briarwood and Troublesome Mystery.
The rain had already started when Elijah Cross stepped off the bus and onto the cracked pavement of the town of Greystone. He tugged his jacket tighter, hunching his shoulders against the sudden chill. The town wasn't on any of his planned stops. It had barely registered on the map. But the bus driver had muttered something about engine trouble and needing a few hours. Elijah had nodded and stepped off, drawn by the dark allure of the mist that curled between street lamps like restless fingers.
He hadn't meant to stay the night, but the cold had a way of shifting plans. The town was quiet, not abandoned, just faded. Storefronts with peeling paint, windows shuttered not out of business, but out of age. A faint scent of wet earth clung to everything. He found the Briarwood Inn 2 blocks up, a looming Victorian shadow at the corner of Main and Hemlock. It didn't look like much from the outside. A squat building with aging white trim and a porch that groaned beneath his steps. The sign above the door was half rotted and swayed in the breeze. Briarwood Inn, established Airati en Nutre to Nutre Mundre. He pushed open the door. A bell chimed overhead, sharp and lonely. The lobby was dim and wood-paneled, with old oil paintings of stormy coasts and faces too faded to recognize. Behind the front desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't moved in hours. Thin, gray-skinned, spectacles perched at the end of a long nose. "Evening," Elijah said, shaking the rain from his jacket. "Any chance you've got a room for the night?" The clerk looked up slowly. His eyes were pale and watery. "Most don't stop here," he said, voice dry as paper. "Lucky you, I guess," Elijah said, offering a small smile. The clerk didn't return it. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a registry book, flipping it open with a brittle snap. "Name? Elijah Cross." He scribbled it into the book with a fountain pen, the ink bleeding slightly into the page. Then he paused. "How many nights?" "Just one." A long silence. The man's eyes studied him in a way that made Elijah's skin crawl. "Room 206 is open," the clerk finally said, reaching for a key. "Or," he trailed off, hand hovering near a separate drawer, "a different key, one that was older, tarnished with age." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Or?" The clerk's lips pursed, as though regretting his own hesitation. "There's another room, not on the usual registry." "Is it better?" "No," the clerk said. "Worse." Elijah let out a quiet laugh. "You're trying to upsell me on a worse room?" "Number, I'm warning you." That gave Elijah pause. His smile faded. "What's the deal with it?" The clerk looked over his shoulder, as though expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "It's not listed anymore, but it's still there. Room 313, the old East Wing. Shut down years ago after..." "After what?" The clerk shook his head. "People don't sleep right in that room. They hear things, see things, and when they leave, if they leave, they're never the same." Elijah stared at him. "You're joking." The man didn't blink. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the ticking of an antique clock behind the desk. And then Elijah did something he might spend the rest of his life regretting. He smiled. "I'll take it." The clerk hesitated. Then, with a whisper of breath, he pulled the old key from the drawer. It was heavier than the others, brass with a black ribbon still tied around the ring. "No refund," the man said softly, placing the key on the counter. "No cleaning service. No wake-up calls. If you hear anything in the night, don't speak to it, and whatever happens, don't whisper back." The hallway to the East Wing had clearly been closed off at some point. A red velvet rope stretched across it, flanked by old warning signs and a layer of dust that coated everything like ash. But the rope was easily moved. The floor creaked beneath Elijah's boots as he walked. Paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. Light bulbs overhead flickered once, twice, then held steady, barely. Room 313 was the last door at the end of the hall. The key turned with surprising ease. The room beyond smelled faintly of mildew and old roses. A four-poster bed dominated the center, covered in thick blankets. The wallpaper had long since faded from pale blue to sickly gray. A wardrobe stood in the corner, its doors slightly ajar. An old writing desk sat near the window, where the rain smeared the glass like tears. Elijah dropped his duffel bag near the bed and let out a low whistle. "This place has vibes," he muttered. The temperature in the room was noticeably colder than the hallway. He rubbed his arms, frowning. The bathroom light flickered twice before staying on. He took a quick look. Old clawfoot tub, rust around the faucet, mirror stained with age. Nothing jumped out at him, no blood, no figures behind the curtain. Still, when he returned to the bedroom, the air felt heavier. He closed the wardrobe. It resisted slightly, then clicked shut. As night deepened, Elijah settled into bed with a worn copy of Dracula, the irony not lost on him. Wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, but inside, the room remained still. At 12:03 a.m., just as he began to drift into sleep, he heard the first whisper. It was soft, so soft in fact he thought he imagined it. "Elijah." He sat up straight. The room was silent again. He turned on the bedside lamp and scanned the room. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no shadows. But the hairs on the back of his neck were standing on end. He got up and checked the hallway. Empty. He laughed nervously. Okay, creepy, sure, but just a dream. Too much vampire fiction. He got back into bed, pulling the covers tighter, but sleep didn't come, because at 12:41 a.m. the whisper returned. This time, right by his ear. "Elijah, help me." He jerked upright, heart slamming in his chest. "Nope," he muttered, grabbing his bag. He wasn't above leaving in the middle of the night. He'd stayed in hostels in Romania, a railcar in Slovakia, even a tent in the Alps. But this felt wrong. He opened the door to the hallway and stopped. The corridor beyond was not the same one he'd come down earlier. Instead of faded floral wallpaper, the walls were now lined with cracked tiles. Instead of the familiar carpet, the floor was black and wet, like old stone. There was no light, just a pulsing red glow far, far down at the end. He closed the door, slowly. "Okay," he said aloud. "I'm officially losing my mind." He turned back to the room, only to find the wardrobe wide open, and something inside it breathing. A ragged, slow inhale, then a wet exhale, like lungs filled with dust and water. Elijah backed away slowly. The wardrobe stayed dark, but the breathing grew louder. "I don't believe in this," he whispered to himself. "There's no such thing, just a prank. Maybe the clerk is screwing with me. Maybe this is some kind of immersive horror experience." The wardrobe creaked. Elijah dove for his bag and pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. The breathing stopped. He stood still for a long time, listening, but the room had returned to silence. After another hour, he fell into a restless sleep, his dreams filled with a woman's voice whispering secrets he couldn't understand. He awoke with the sun, the room bathed in pale light. Everything was back to normal. The hallway outside looked the same as it had the night before. The wardrobe was closed. His phone buzzed with full bars again. He nearly convinced himself it had all been a dream, until he noticed something scratched into the inside of the wardrobe door. 4 words, "Do not whisper back." Beneath it, in newer script, was something else. "You already did.